I shouldn't have lingered that night. I should have just fixed the hinge and left, but something about the way she stood in the doorway made the air too heavy to move through. Her name was Claire. She wasn't supposed to be anyone more than my friend's mom's lawyer, a woman who came by sometimes to drop papers, sometimes to stay late on calls in the den. She was older, somewhere in her 40s, sharp in the way she spoke, but softer when she thought no one was watching. I noticed that softness the first time I carried in a box of files for her. She smiled at me like I wasn't just some kid running errands, like she actually saw me. It was the kind of smile you don't forget. That evening, though, it was just us. My friend wasn't home. His mom had stepped out. Claire had stopped by to review some documents and complained, half to herself, about the door hinge creaking. I offered to take a look. That's how I ended up crouched down in the entryway, screwdriver in hand, trying not to think about how close she was standing behind me. "You don't have to," she said. Her voice was low, careful, almost guarded. "I don't mind," I answered, even though my hands felt clumsy. The hallway was quiet, except for the soft scrape of metal and the occasional shuffle of her heels against the hardwood. She stayed too near, close enough that I caught the faint scent of her perfume. Something warm and clean, like rain on fabric. I told myself not to notice. I told myself it didn't mean anything. "You're good at this," she murmured. I let out a short laugh. "Not really. Just pretending." She tilted her head. "Pretending's a skill, too?" The way she said it made me pause. I looked up at her, and for a moment, her eyes stayed on mine longer than they should have. She was the first to look away, smoothing a strand of hair back like she regretted letting it hang there too long. I tightened the last screw and stood, brushing dust from my palms. She thanked me, her words polite but softer than before. Something in the silence after pressed between us. It wasn't heavy in a bad way, it was sharp, like glass. She gathered her files, moving toward the dining table, but stopped when I asked, "Do you ever get tired of it?" She glanced over her shoulder. "Of what?" "Keeping everyone's secrets." Her hands froze on the folder. A strange smile tugged at her mouth, half amused, half tired. "That's my job," she said quietly. "Confidentiality. You learn to carry things." I leaned against the doorway. "And if it's too much?" She studied me for a beat too long. "Then you pretend it isn't." Her words should have ended it, but they didn't. They hovered in the air, like she hadn't spoken to a client's son but to me, directly. I felt something shift, like the room had gotten smaller. She walked past, close enough that the sleeve of her coat brushed against my arm. She didn't stop, but she didn't rush either. My throat tightened with something I didn't want to name. "Claire," I said before I thought better of it. She turned, one eyebrow raised. The faintest trace of curiosity flickered across her face. I should have stayed quiet, but the words slipped out anyway. "If it's confidential." I hesitated, then forced myself to finish. "Then I'll keep your secret." Her smile faltered, not gone, not quite, but something deeper surfaced in her eyes. Something she hadn't planned on showing me. She stepped closer, folders pressed tight against her chest. "You don't know what you're saying." But she didn't walk away. And I couldn't move. I thought she'd laugh it off, tell me I was just a kid messing around. Instead, Claire stood there, folders clutched to her chest like armor, eyes steady but guarded. "You shouldn't say things like that," she murmured. "I didn't mean." I stopped, realizing I couldn't finish the sentence without lying. "I just meant, you can trust me." Her gaze softened for a second, then hardened again, as if she'd remembered something. She moved to the dining table and spread out the documents. I could have left then. I should have. But my feet stayed planted. I watched her hands smooth the pages, elegant, precise. Every movement was controlled, but her shoulders betrayed her, too tight, as if she was holding more than just paperwork. "Rough day?" I asked quietly. Her head lifted, surprised by the gentleness in my tone. She almost answered, then caught herself. "I don't usually talk about my days." I leaned on the back of a chair. Maybe you should. She gave me a look, part warning, part curiosity. And why would I tell you? Because I notice, I wanted to say. Because I've seen the way your eyes dim when you think no one's looking, how you loosen your hair only when you're alone, like you need small freedoms. But all I managed was, because you know I'd keep it. Her lips pressed together, but her silence felt louder than words. She shuffled the papers again, though they didn't need straightening. Finally, she sighed. I just finalized a divorce. Yesterday. The word divorce hung in the air, heavy. My chest tightened. I hadn't expected her to tell me something real. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be, she replied too quickly, as though rehearsed. Then, softer, almost breaking. It was overdue. But endings still cut, even when you know they should. Her hand rested on the table, fingers curled lightly, as if gripping something invisible. I couldn't stop staring at that hand, the veins faintly visible, the faint tremor in her thumb. I wanted to reach for her, but my own hand stayed frozen at my side. You don't have to tell me more, I said, voice low. Claire exhaled, a sound between relief and weariness. She looked at me then, really looked. You're too young to understand what regret feels like. I almost laughed, but it caught in my throat. Maybe. But I know what it's like to want something you can't have. The words slipped out before I could catch them. She blinked, startled, and the silence that followed was unbearable. She broke it first, but not with the dismissal I braced for. Instead, her tone was softer, tentative. You should go, but I don't want you to. Her eyes didn't leave mine when she said it. I stepped closer, pulse pounding, every nerve telling me to back away but my body refusing. She reached out then, almost hesitantly, and her hand brushed my arm. Just a touch, brief, electric. Stay, she whispered. And I did. I stayed because she asked, but I told myself I wouldn't push. That was the lie I kept repeating as Claire poured 2 glasses of water and set one in front of me. We sat at the dining table, papers spread out between us like they could shield us from the silence pressing in. She wasn't looking at me, not directly. Her eyes skimmed the files, but her fingers lingered on the rim of her glass. I couldn't help noticing the small, absent movements, the way she traced tiny circles on the condensation, how her shoulders lifted and fell in uneven rhythm. You don't have to keep me company, I said. Her laugh was short, almost brittle. And what would you do if I asked you to leave? I'd go, I admitted, even though my chest burned saying it. But I'd probably think about it all night. That made her pause. Slowly she looked up. There it was again, that faint break in her composure, something raw slipping through. Her eyes softened, but her lips pressed into a line, as though she couldn't allow both at once. You talk like you don't know the difference between safe and reckless, she said. Maybe I don't, I answered, and for once, I didn't try to pull the words back. The air thickened. She reached for the folder nearest to her, but her hand brushed mine instead. Neither of us moved for a second. Just the soft slide of her skin against my knuckles, brief, but it lingered like a burn. I shifted, leaning back, trying to gather myself. My pulse wouldn't slow down. This was dangerous. She knew it. I knew it. That should have been enough to stop. But then her phone buzzed on the table. She flinched, snatching it up quickly, almost too quickly. Her face stayed neutral, but her grip on the phone was too tight. She silenced the call without answering. Everything okay? I asked. Just work. She set the phone face down, but her fingers lingered against it. They always want something. I caught the faint tremor in her voice. She was lying. Or at least, not telling me all of it. But I didn't press. Instead, I said quietly, You don't have to explain. That was when she really looked at me, not with caution this time, but with something closer to hunger. Like she hadn't expected someone to notice, let alone accept it. Her chair scraped slightly as she shifted closer, her arm brushing mine. Too deliberate to be an accident, too subtle to be bold. I shouldn't, she whispered, almost to herself. I leaned in before I realized what I was doing. Then tell me to stop. But she didn't. We stayed like that, close enough that her breath grazed my cheek, close enough that the next word could undo everything. And just as she parted her lips to speak, the sound of a key turning in the front door froze us both. The sound of the front door unlocking jolted through the room like a siren. Claire shot upright, shoving the folders into a neat pile with shaking hands. I stood too quickly, the chair legs scraping against the hardwood. But no one entered. The door opened, then shut again, just her neighbor dropping off the wrong mail. A muffled "sorry" filtered through the hall. Silence followed, heavier than before. My pulse thundered in my ears. Claire stayed frozen, hands still pressed flat against the table, knuckles white. That was close, I breathed. She let out a tight laugh that didn't sound like her. This is ridiculous. You shouldn't even be here. But I am, I said. She looked at me then, finally, fully. Her expression wavered, like she was deciding between pushing me away and pulling me closer. You're making this harder than it already is. I'm not trying to make anything harder. I swallowed. I just don't want to pretend like I don't notice you. Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. Her eyes flicked away, toward the window, then back to me. You think noticing is harmless? I stepped closer, careful but unflinching. No. It's the opposite. That's why I can't stop. For a moment, I thought she'd tell me to leave, put an end to it. Instead, she whispered, Do you have any idea what you're doing? The truth caught in my throat. No. But I know how it feels when you look at me like that. Her breath hitched barely, but I caught it. She leaned back against the table, pressing her palms into the wood as if to ground herself. You're too young to carry this kind of weight. I don't care. My voice cracked, too raw, too honest. What scares me isn't my age. It's the thought that you might never let yourself feel this. Her eyes softened, but it wasn't relief I saw there. It was recognition, the kind that hurts more than it heals. She shook her head slowly, but the denial didn't match her trembling hands. You have no idea how long it's been since someone said that to me. That admission hung between us, fragile and dangerous. I stepped closer again until the air felt too thin. Then let me be the one who does. Her hand twitched like she might reach for me, then stopped short. She bit her lip, shaking her head again, but she didn't move away. The room was too quiet. Every sound, the tick of the clock, the distant hum of a car outside, felt magnified. We were a breath apart, her eyes locked on mine, both of us waiting for someone to break. Finally, she whispered, barely audible, If I let this happen, I don't know if I'll stop. And then she fell silent. Just her eyes holding mine, a question burning there, unanswered. Her words lingered in the silence. If I let this happen, I don't know if I'll stop. I didn't move, afraid the smallest gesture would shatter the fragile truth between us. But then, just when the quiet seemed unbearable, she spoke again. You remind me of someone, she said, her voice unsteady. I frowned. Who? Her eyes clouded, looking not at me but through me. When I was your age, there was someone I couldn't be with. We kept circling, almost crossing the line, never enough courage to admit it. She inhaled sharply. I let him slip away. I told myself it was the right choice. Responsible. Mature. And I've regretted it every day since. The regret was written across her face now, etched into the lines near her eyes, the tremor at her mouth. I didn't breathe. She forced a shaky smile. And now here you are, standing in the same place, looking at me the same way he did. It landed like a confession and a warning at once. My chest tightened, but I couldn't pull back. Then maybe this time, I said, my voice barely steady, you don't have to regret it. Her eyes snapped to mine. For a heartbeat, I thought she might break. But instead, she whispered, You don't understand. You're his son's friend. Do you know what people would say? What it would do to him? To me? The weight of it sank in. She was right. It wasn't just us in this. My best friend's mom trusted her, leaned on her. She wasn't just a woman I wanted, she was tangled in a web of lives I'd never meant to disturb. I know, I admitted. But I can't pretend I don't feel this. Not anymore. Her hand twitched, as if reaching for me, then retreated halfway. Don't. She started, then faltered. Don't say things you can't take back. But the truth was already out. I meant it, I said, firmer this time. Every word. Her breath caught, her shoulders stiffening. And then, just as the silence tipped into something unbearable, her phone buzzed again, sharp against the wood of the table. She jumped. This time she answered. Her tone was brisk, professional, but I caught the cracks beneath. Yes. Tomorrow morning. No, I don't want to reschedule. Just send me the files. She hung up quickly, shoving the phone away like it had bitten her. When she finally met my eyes again, hers were glassy, raw. That was my ex-husband. She whispered. He still finds excuses to call. He still thinks I'll go back. The revelation hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to say something comforting, something brave, but nothing felt right. Claire's voice softened, almost breaking. Don't you see? If I cross this line with you, I'll lose more than just control. I'll lose the last piece of myself I've been holding together. I didn't know what to answer. My throat closed. We just stood there, the truth between us, both of us cornered by it. And in that silence, the question neither of us spoke pressed louder than anything else. Was this the beginning of something, or the end? The air between us felt like it could splinter. Her last words, I'll lose the last piece of myself I've been holding together, cut deeper than anything she could have said about age or rules. I should have stepped back then. I should have let her keep her armor. Instead, I found myself saying, maybe you don't have to hold it all alone. Claire's eyes snapped to mine. For a long moment, she didn't blink. Then her voice cracked, lower than a whisper. You don't understand how dangerous it is for me to need someone again. I swallowed. Then don't call it need. Call it honesty. Call it what it is. Her hand trembled where it rested against the edge of the table. She looked down at it like it belonged to someone else. Slowly, she drew in a breath and lifted her gaze back to me. You think this is simple, she said, but there wasn't conviction behind the words anymore. There was something else, exhaustion, longing, maybe even fear. It's not simple, I admitted. It's the hardest thing I've ever tried to say out loud. Her laugh was small, humorless, but it carried relief. You don't even know me. I do, I insisted. Not the files. Not the lawyer who holds it together. I see you when you're tired, when you think no one notices. I see the part you try to hide. That broke her. I could see it in the way her chest rose sharply, the way she bit her lip to keep something inside. For once, she didn't look away. She whispered, You shouldn't say things like that unless you're ready to live with them. I already am. Her face softened in a way I hadn't seen before, not guarded, not amused, not even conflicted. Just raw, unshielded. Slowly, almost painfully, she stepped closer. My pulse thundered as she raised a hand, hesitating before brushing her fingers lightly against my jaw. The touch was tentative, like she was testing whether it was real. I didn't move. Couldn't. God, this is reckless, she breathed. I leaned in, not to steal a kiss, but to let her feel the truth in the space between us. Then be reckless with me. The silence stretched, thick and trembling. Her hand lingered against my face, her eyes locked on mine. She searched me, for doubt, for weakness, for the excuse to stop. But I didn't give her one. And when she finally exhaled, the sound was both surrender and release. Her forehead leaned gently against mine, and in that closeness, not quite a kiss, not yet, everything unsaid was spoken. She whispered, If this ruins me, you'll have to be the one to hold me up. I will, I promised, the words steady despite the storm inside me. We stayed like that, suspended in silence, a fragile vow binding us tighter than anything else could. We stayed in that fragile closeness for what felt like hours, though it couldn't have been more than a minute. Claire's hand rested against my face, her forehead leaning into mine, our breaths tangled in the thin space left between us. It wasn't about the kiss anymore. It wasn't about the temptation or the thrill of secrecy. It was about the quiet, terrifying honesty of being seen. When she finally pulled back, it wasn't with the sharp retreat I feared. She lingered, her hands sliding down my jaw before falling away. Her eyes were wet but steady. "You make me feel like I'm 20 again," she said softly. "Like I haven't lost anything." "You haven't," I answered without thinking. "You're still here. And I'm not going anywhere." Her lips trembled into the faintest smile, tired, cautious, but real. She sat down, motioning for me to join her. I did, and for once, the silence wasn't suffocating. It was gentle, a pause that let both of us breathe. "I should tell you no," she admitted, fingers tracing the rim of her glass again. "But every time I try, I realize I don't want to." I leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Then don't." Her laugh was quiet, breaking the heaviness. "You make everything sound so easy." "It's not easy," I said. "It's just worth it." That shut her up, not with anger, but with a kind of acceptance. For the first time, she wasn't trying to fight it. We didn't need to spell out what came next. No dramatic kiss, no sudden embrace. Just a choice, unspoken but undeniable, to stop pretending, to stop pushing it away. She reached for my hand across the table, and when our fingers laced together, the world finally felt steady. Not simple. Not without risk. But steady. In that moment, the danger, the secrecy, the years between us, they didn't disappear, but they no longer felt bigger than what was sitting right there in her eyes. And maybe that was the point. That sometimes, what matters isn't whether it's easy or even allowed, it's whether you're willing to carry it together. I left later that night with a promise. Not spoken out loud, but written in the way she squeezed my hand before letting go. We were stepping into something complicated, something uncertain, but neither of us was walking away. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was pretending. Sparkles, did you enjoy the story? Backhand index pointing right. What kind of stories would you like to hear next? More forbidden romance, emotional slow burns, or something completely different?